Hello, this is Bentvnewsroundup, a compilation of major stories in the weekend. I am Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. The Labour Party has criticized the government for outsourcing its NHS services to private companies. Speaking during the Prime Minister's question time, Labour leader Shomi Corbyn said that outsourcing the NHS services to profit-making companies is against the founding principle of the NHS. However, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, said that the government has put in more resources into the NHS in recent time.
Mr. Speaker, in 2010, £4 billion of NHS services were outsourced to private companies. How much is it today?
Well, can I first of all say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that I echo his comments. The terrorists who attacked in Manchester, but also, sadly, we saw a number of other terrorist attacks in this country last year. They were trying to divide us. I think the response of all communities, be it here in London or in Manchester, has shown that we will not be divided by the terrorists, we will not let the terrorists win, and we will defeat them. Can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman that he asks about the outsourcing of services within the National Health Service. Of course, what we do know is that spend on the independent sector nearly doubled in the last 4 years of a Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, my question was about the amount spent now. NHS budgets have increased by just 1% per year under this government, but it's jackpot time for the privateers. Their share is up by 100% to over £9 billion per year. And we learnt that Surrey NHS has just paid Virgin Healthcare £1.5 million, not for any service they delivered, but because their bid wasn't chosen. £1.5 million wasted on Virgin Healthcare that should have been spent on healthcare itself. Is the Prime Minister concerned that this week the National Audit Office said NHS England's handling of private contractors had, and I quote, put patients at risk of serious harm?
The Right Honourable Gentleman that on the National Audit Office report, what they said was no actual harm has been identified. It is also the case that in relation to the particular contracts they were talking about, the savings that have been made have all been reinvested in frontline NHS patient care and has helped to fund the equivalent of an extra 30,000 operations. But he talks about the percentage of money that has been spent on the private sector. I have to say, last year the proportion of spend in the NHS in England outsourced to private sector did not go up at all. There was somewhere where it went up 0.8%. Ah yes, Wales.
Mr. Speaker, the National Audit Office criticised NHS England's Capita contract, saying, and I quote, it had put patients at risk of serious harm. Thousands of women dropped from the National Cervical Cancer Screening Programmes. Another element of the contract handed over to Capita was for GP services, which resulted in 2/3 of GP practices receiving incorrect medical records. 500,000 new patient letters left unsent. Isn't this the inevitable consequence of this government tearing up the founding principles of the NHS and putting private profit before public service?
Can I say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, at every general election since the NHS was formed, the Labour Party has scaremongered about the Conservative approach to the NHS. They have made, at every general election, they've made claims about privatisation, they've made claims about funding cuts. And what has every elected Conservative government done? We have protected the NHS. We have protected the NHS. We have improved the NHS services. We have put more funding into the NHS. And we have ensured that we remain true to the founding principle of the NHS, that it is free at the point of delivery.
From the party that opposed the NHS in the first place, that is a bit rich. Mr. Speaker.
Order. Far too much noise on both sides of the House. I've got plenty of time, and I'm sure the principals have as well, and we will get through the questions, but preferably in an atmosphere of calm. Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, the Royal College of GPs says, and I quote, "The long list of failures made by Capita have been incredibly frustrating for GPs and our teams. We are still dealing with the fallout. It's public servants bearing the brunt of private failure." Mr. Speaker, GPs are leaving the profession in despair. 4,000 have retired early in the past 5 years. That's 1 in 10. In 2015, the Health Secretary said he would hire another 5,000 GPs.
Yeah, where are they?
How many more GPs are there than there were in 2015?
Well, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, we now have over 14,900 more doctors in our NHS than in 2010. And we are indeed committed to delivering 5,000 more GPs, and we've increased the number of training for GPs. But can I also say to the right honourable gentleman, he talks about this issue of the private sector being used in the National Health Service. Well, he might actually ask the Shadow Health Secretary what his view is on this, because the Shadow Health Secretary has said we're still going to buy from the private sector where we haven't got capacity in the NHS. His Shadow Health Secretary is committed to it.
That's always happened.
Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Health Secretary has a very good understanding of the needs of patients and would always put them first. And he will not be the one who's putting the private sector first. Mr. Speaker, the reality is there are 1,000 fewer GPs and the number is falling. No wonder that more and more people are writing to me every week saying how difficult it is to get a GP appointment. GPs are the bedrock of the NHS. We need more of them. Mr. Speaker, I had a letter this week from Anne. Yes, Anne, she is somebody who is retired and until recently had been caring for her mother at home. And she wrote, "The NHS pay a private nursing home for mum's care. Day after day we experience a catalogue of disasters. I can't leave my mum knowing that her needs aren't catered for. So I spend hours at the nursing home. What action is the government taking to deal with the substandard care providers give in the private care sector, which is so upsetting for so many people?"
To the right honourable gentleman and to Anne, that I fully understand that people want to ensure and want to have the confidence and the reassurance of knowing that the care that their loved ones is receiving is of a good quality. That is why it is this government, that's put into place the various steps to ensure that we are looking into the quality of care that is provided in those sectors. But he talks about the Shadow Health Secretary recognising the needs of patients. I think he was saying he recognised the needs of patients, and that's why the private sector would be used in some cases. But can I just also say to him that the former health minister, now the mayor for Manchester, said the private sector puts its capacity into the NHS for the benefit of NHS patients, which I think most people in this country would celebrate.
Jeremy Corbyn.
The Shadow Health Secretary is dedicated to the NHS, not to handing it over to private contractors. That's the difference. Mr. Speaker, the Care Quality Commission said last year there is too much poor care. A fifth of care providers require improvement. Year after year, private sector care providers are letting down our elderly.
Experts have warned that Africa is at risk from cyber attacks as the use of internet and technology grow in the continent. Warning of impending cyber attacks, the experts stated that the increasing use of mobile technology without corresponding safeguards has put the continent in great danger from cyber criminals.
The adoption of technology across Africa is growing exponentially. Online commerce is predicted to be worth $75 billion by the year 2025. But with opportunity comes risk.
The cyber security infrastructure, most of the countries don't have it. And those who've got it, it's in a very level, in an infancy level.
A report by security firm Norton says close to 9 million South Africans claim to have experienced cybercrime in 2016.
Africa as a continent loses over $2.5 billion a year to cybercrime, and over 500 million is from Nigeria.
Like the internet, cybercrime easily crosses borders, and Africa has been hit by recent global attacks. Ransomware, where criminals demand money in return for unfreezing affected devices, plus other viruses and social media scams, have all affected the continent. But experts warn the lack of preparedness in Africa poses additional dangers.
Most of the African states do not have the cybersecurity crisis management plan in place, and they don't have a kind of education, and the legislation as well is very weak because they do focus on traditional crime.
Governments should collaborate more closely with the private sector, says Itimi.
The private sector has more knowledge about cybersecurity and what infrastructure needs to be put in place to actually solve that. Also, information and education. Individuals need to be educated.
Nigeria is one of the few African states to have passed specific cybercrime legislation, but there have been very few prosecutions.
And the reason why there's implementation problems is because we don't have lawyers who are well educated on cybercrimes to be able to put a case to a judge.
The so-called Internet of Things, where devices like thermostats, televisions, even cars are connected to the web, is set to change everyday life for people and businesses. But experts warn more investment and education are needed.
When you look at their budget first for the IT or IT security, it's very small, and some of them do not even invest at all. So they are waiting for something to happen, then they can deal with it.
Africa is a global leader in the adoption of mobile technology for money transfers, with over 1 in 10 people using the technology. Experts warn cyber criminals see that as an opportunity and are increasingly targeting mobile devices for identity theft and scams.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has said that social media network is faced with enormous challenges from its adversaries and may not have immediate solutions to many of the crises associated with the social media giant. Facebook has been under scrutiny when it became public knowledge that the data analysis company Cambridge Analytica harvested information on Facebook users to help Donald Trump during his 2016 presidential campaign. Campaigners, however, have been asking for an end to Facebook monopoly.
Protesters demonstrated in Brussels on Tuesday, demanding action to prevent the world's most popular social media network from spreading false news.
We've brought an army of fake Mark Zuckerbergs to Brussels today to highlight the fact that Facebook is rife with fake accounts. And these fake accounts launch organized disinformation attacks on our democracy. And it's time for MEPs, for regulators, to make Facebook come clean.
Meanwhile, Facebook CEO and co-founder Mark Zuckerberg did his best to defend his company before the European Parliament.
In 2016, we were too slow to identify Russian interference on Facebook in the US presidential election. At the time, we were more focused on more traditional kinds of cyber attacks, like phishing and malware. And we identified those and we told people.
Zuckerberg said the company has learned from its mistakes and it took steps in 2017 to protect Facebook users ahead of elections in several countries.
We're also using new technology, including AI, to remove fake accounts that are responsible for much of the false news, misinformation, and bad ads that people can see on Facebook.
But the chairman of the world's largest social media network acknowledged he has no permanent fix.
Our adversaries, especially on the election side, people who are trying to interfere, will have access to some of the same AI tools that we will. So it's an arms race and we'll need to constantly be working to stay ahead.
German lawmaker Jan Philipp Albrecht told reporters that Zuckerberg failed to convince European lawmakers that his enterprise is not a monopoly.
We need to regulate more on market power of Facebook, for example. Splitting off Facebook from WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger is an option after tonight, because that was one of the questions where Mark Zuckerberg had no real answer on.
A massive breach of Facebook users' personal data has prompted the European Union to pass a new law to prevent it from happening again. The law, the General Data Protection Regulation, comes into power on Friday. But many lawmakers and social media users say more needs to be done to prevent the network abuses.
The businesses of the Gupta family in South Africa have been hit as investigation continues into the corruption of the Guptas, who have now fled South Africa. Former President Jacob Zuma has been linked to the Gupta's corruption case.
Abram Serapello is ready to work, but he has no idea when or if he'll be paid. He's one of some 700 workers at the Shiva uranium mine who are waiting for their salaries from the Guptas. The Guptas are a family of Indian businessmen who fled South Africa in February as Parliament investigates their alleged influence on decisions by former President Jacob Zuma.
We don't know if we are still working or we still have the job. Are we safe as workers?
Union official Kaya Ngaleka says he has heard worrying reports from Shiva Mine, an indication that even the family's above-board enterprises cut corners.
It's bad conditions, they're underpaid, they're not actually having what other employees in other companies who are doing the very same job are having.
Former Shiva mine worker Job Majalinyane says he feels the Gupta family has left this community, which depends on the mines for employment, in tatters. He criticized them for underpaying workers.
Hey, I'm feeling so very bad because of that thing have given the whole country and the whole other communities that is around the mines a lot and a hell of poverty.
Attention naturally centers around the highest level corruption. The former president is dealing with two investigations, one into alleged kickbacks on an arms deal that predates the Gupta's arrival in South Africa, the other into his relationship with the Guptas. A top corruption watchdog says it could take years to unravel this complex web.
I do think that what is necessary is the full story to be told, which is, I guess, one of the positives of a commission of inquiry is that it can, in the long run, be able to tell a full story, a fuller story at least than a criminal investigation would reveal.
That's little comfort for Serapello, who says the recent police raids on his former employer's luxury home in Johannesburg don't give him much satisfaction. He's more worried about supporting his 11 family members.
Maybe like Zuma is going to trial, but the real culprits are not going to trial as we speak. Guptas are still free, like not Zuma. And I'm not saying Zuma is a bad person or a good person, but Zuma, he was robbed also, as we did being robbed as South Africans.
And so while investigators look at the Gupta's influence over the nation's presidency, in this remote mining town, workers are asking, what about what they did to us?
A Nigerian presidential aspirant for 2019 election, Ali Shoyode, has canvassed collective responsibility as a way of solving Nigeria's problems. Speaking at the British House of Parliament, the media entrepreneur said that every Nigerian will be responsible for contributing to Nigeria's development, while competent hands will drive the growth agenda.
My take is, you have a team of 11 players and you have a captain. You just need to identify each captain that is the best in economy, education, employment, energy, enterprise, dealing with our elders, and then now the bigger picture, which is expert, and then rounding it up with the security. Now, when you know talent, you're bound to know how to find them and then give them the mandate, delegate the job to them. And because you have your little experience or knowledge of the industry, it will not allow people to just come in and sing praises to you. I'm not going to be a sitting office leader. And I have hardly been, over the last 20 years that I've been running my business, I have always put my hand in it. And as I go transverse Nigeria with the politicians who are elected, either governors or president, I'm always with them, even in the rural villages, midnight, early morning, either campaigning or visiting site where they have done project or project in process. So I know what it takes to identify the best of Nigerians to deal with this. And as I say, being the captain in a team is a collective responsibility. So we will identify the best people that can deal with it individually. I have my own understanding, and I know my understanding is not below the level of those who are there presently. It's above, based on what I have seen and what I have experienced around the world and even in Nigeria. Talking on the other one, what are my plans for the health sector? Doctor, you are the medical doctor, and I'm grateful that in my family as well, I have a medical doctor as a child. So I'm grateful, and even from their experience as a medical doctor, I have been briefed. I have listened to my own family doctor, which is my family. And now you guys, either through MEMSA, through other organizations that are working in the industry, to say, yes, there is no doubt in Nigeria, people are not treated unless they pay. That is wrong. The system is supposedly to take care of these people. Even if you can't do for every citizen, there will be a level of people that you should take care of freely without the need of them having assurance or security before doctors or nurses deal with their cases. Many lives, thousands of lives have been lost due to that ineffectiveness in our health sector. It needs to change. It needs to stop. The purpose of leadership is showing by example and leading by example. And people will trust you based on what you're delivering, not because you're just talking out of random people making speeches on your behalf. No. I'm a hands-on person. And the reason why we're joining this process is because we really, truly mean well for Nigeria as a nation and for the Nigerian people. So whatever it takes for us to reform, we will do it. Whatever it takes for us to bring in the best brain in Nigeria that are in that industry, they will be encouraged, they will be empowered. We shouldn't allow things that is happening to continue to happen, either to our elders, our parents, the younger ones that don't have the opportunity to be able to pay. This thing needs to change. But only when everybody here support our cause can we get there. We can all talk about it, we can all dream about it, but without your support and those watching, it will not happen. Because those that may be there, they did not sweat to get to where they are. They do not know the label. Neither do they understand what it is for them to provide the services. They can only do what they know, and you shouldn't blame them for what they don't know. Then, of course, now we're asking about the energy sector. Yes, the global world is moving into artificial intelligence as of today. What is Nigeria for me now? I'm just saying, well, there must be something called political intelligence. But their understanding is totally different from where we're coming from. And we have to look at the bigger picture as well. We have to reform. The technology is moving. The world is moving and living on technology. It's moving on living on innovation and creativity. If we cannot do same, then we'll be lagging behind. But Nigerians are creative, we're innovative, and with our international partners, who now will sit around the table as equal partners, we will be able to develop our technology to cater for our rural, our cities, and our state, and by and large our country. I'm not going to sit in front of somebody that will be surprised that somebody is asking me to sit down around the table and thought, wow, it won't be me. I have been here, I've met world leaders, world prime ministers, not because I'm a prime minister, world president, not because I'm a president, but because of the job and the commitment of what we have been doing in our own community.
And with that, we conclude the news roundup for this week. Thank you for being part of the program. I am Tunde Alabi. See you again. Bye. Regardless resident status abroad, living outside the shores of one's homeland can really be challenging and sometimes very difficult. Let's be sincere, to keep pace with happenings from the host country abroad can really be difficult. Here on Dialogue in Diaspora, we give you every information, every news, every current issue you need to know on happenings outside the UK. Dialogue in Diaspora is your link between the world and the United Kingdom. It's your window to African development. Here, live on Bentvn Vision.